I'm Zibby Owens, and you're listening to the award-winning podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Thanks so much for listening to my podcast. If you like what you hear, please follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and also at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Today's sponsor is Blueland Cleaning. Blueland is an eco-friendly cleaning products company on a mission to eliminate single-use plastic packaging. They offer their products as a set of reusable bottles, along with cleaning tablets that you simply add to warm water to make a full bottle of hand soap or cleaning solution. Also founded by a mom with a 3-year-old son. My kids loved making all these products with me, and now we have these amazing glass bottles in all different color hues that make cleaning a little bit more fun, especially during quarantine. I loved interviewing Maria Russo. Maria is the former children's books editor of the New York Times Book Review. She and co-author Pamela Paul wrote How to Raise a Reader, which is like right up my alley. We had so much to talk about and even came up with this great idea, I think, of a new business. And it was just great to talk about someone who is equally passionate about reading and getting our kids to read and all the rest. So enjoy. Welcome, Maria. Thanks so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books.
Hi, Zibby. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. How to raise a reader. This is like one of the things on my mind all the time. I have 4 kids and I am constantly trying to like figure the answer out to this. And you've done it. You've written the book on it. Tell me about the book. Like, what inspired you to write this book? Why? Tell me more about it.
Well, as you say, I'm a mom too. I have 3 kids, and my co-author, Pamela Paul, also has 3. And there we were at the New York Times Book Review, thinking about the subject all the time, really, in our personal lives and in our work life, right? Because I was the children's books editor. She was and is the editor, but had previously been the children's books editor. So a lot of people ask us questions all the time. There's just a constant question in the air, exactly as you say. How do I raise a reader? How do I get my kids to read? How do I support my kids reading? And what are the best books for my kid to read? Which actually, as we'll talk later about, in some ways, that's the most challenging question for parents. The other stuff can be, I think, fairly easy and joyful. It's the idea that to raise a reader, that reader actually has to have access to a lot of different good books is actually where the job of the parent comes in. So it started out as a small digital project that we did for the Times called also How to Raise a Reader. First, it was a special thing for New York Times subscribers only, kind of a little extra. And it really took off. It really went viral. We got lots of reactions, and probably the most common reaction was, when will this be a book? Because people wanted to hold it in their hand. And and it just occurred to us, it's a natural, it's really obvious. I wish I had this book when my first child was born. I was on the older side, and even though I've been a bookish person my whole life, my career has been in books, I didn't know that much about children's books and about reading to children, reading with children. There's so much information that parents aren't really getting, even the most booky among us. So it just seemed, my immediate vision was like, this is a baby shower gift. This is the book I wish I had at my baby shower. And I think every parent would want, really, just as you're even just getting ready to bring this baby home and into your family. So it just kind of took off from there. And it's just been this really, surprisingly smooth and kind of joyful adventure, to do this book, because you start talking about the subject and people light up, people have happy memories and happy, associations around their children's books. But at the same time, as you say, there's a little bit of worry. There's a lot of anxiety too. So I feel like we're also able to help a little bit with the anxiety that all of us as parents are feeling now.
So true. And books being a resource for me and probably for you during this time has been so key. All I want to do is give that resource to my kids and let them like take comfort in it the way that I have my whole life, but that it doesn't necessarily automatically happen that way.
Right. It's not as automatic as a lot of us lifelong readers think for a lot of kids. For some kids it is. And your job as a parent is to get to know your individual kid and then provide the right atmosphere so that that kid can choose reading automatically. But, I think probably in some ways one of our most powerful tips, which actually comes from research, is simply have a lot of books in your home. I mean, this is, actual research showed that children who grew up in a home with a substantial amount of books, I mean, I can't remember the exact number, were more likely to become lifelong readers and to be successful in other areas of life. And this was a study that was controlled for income and education. So this wasn't just about, affluent, bookish, literary people raising readers like they are. This was something that they identified that has to do with the presence of physical books in a child's life is a good thing. And so that's something that you can do as a parent. You can fill your house with books, and, we do point out it's children's books, obviously, that your kid, books they like, things you think they might choose and like, but also adult books. It's really important for your child to see you reading. And one of our kind of maxims in the book that we say a lot is, and not to be judgy or anything like that, but just making people recognize if you want to raise a reader, you really should be a reader. And it so often happens when you become a parent and we're also busy and it's just this onrush of new responsibilities when that baby first comes, you can kind of let your own reading life slide out of the picture, right? And even if you were a big reader, a lot of people in that first year or even, for years afterward, they kind of lose that connection to their own reading life. And that's not a good thing that you're doing for your children because as a parent, they're watching you. They're looking at you and saying, how does my mom or my dad, how do they fill their hours? What does it mean, to be a grown up? What do grown-ups do? And what do people do? What is life like in our family? And if they see people picking up books, sitting there and reading them, or standing at the kitchen counter reading while they make dinner, just the idea that there's people reading books in their life, that's a message. And it's really, really deep and powerful. And it's easy. It's good. It's good for you too, to reconnect to your own reading life, to the books that you loved. And, I mean, this is another one of our big messages in the book. It doesn't have to be War and Peace that you're reading. I like self-help books. I like gardening books. I like comics, to take the pressure off around reading for yourself and for your kids and find the time to just have that pleasure in your own life. And then as you're saying, as your kids are wandering around the house, what should I do now? It's going to be more likely that that's an activity they would choose, when they do have so many other, screen-based options.
It's like preaching to the choir talking to you. This is like all the same stuff I try to say myself. It's perfect. It's really great. And you said such great stuff in your book that I hadn't really thought about in the same way. Like you say, that you wish that there was a support system around raising a reader, which is such an interesting thing, right? Because you have to be deliberate in how you do all of these things, right? You can have a support system around helping your kids get a regular exercise, but do you think about it in terms of books? You should, and you must.
That's a great point. That like the exercise thing, we don't think twice about, calling a friend and be like, oh, does your, so and so want to go to the park and play soccer with your, my kid? I've done that. But do you call a friend and say, what book is your daughter reading now? My daughter doesn't have anything at the moment. Any recommendations? That's something we should do. I do that and find that happening naturally because of my job, right? So people do come to me. I'm constantly getting texts. What should so and so my daughter read, my son read? But anyone can do it, and it's really just, it's also, for me, it's even aside from my job, I became very curious. Like, what is that kid reading?
Maria,
What kids reading?
we should start a really cool app that's like Goodreads for kids. That's like something as cool as TikTok, and they share the books, and then like Like I have to go research this now. There must be something out there, or I should talk to the Goodreads people, but there should be something that makes it cool. And then they can see what their friends are reading. And in the same way that like, my daughter has to have like this exact hydro flask or she's like not cool or whatever it is, like they have to read these same books. Like, I don't feel like there is that kind of zeitgeist around books right now for kids.
I love that idea. I mean, I feel like if it was Goodreads, then it would be associated with the moms, and they might like it has to be
right. It has to be something cool.
Its own.
Yeah.
And I think that in little micro communities of kids, it does happen. Like you said, like did your daughter go through the Raina Telgemeier phase?
Yes.
Okay. When she was reading those books, I promise you, all of her friends were too, and they were trading them and talking about them. So
but they weren't posting them.
right, exactly. So if you could find a way that they would then connect to kids outside of their own little friend group.
Right? How neat would it be if they could connect to somebody in like, Texas who's reading the same book right now and they could have like a little chat. I mean, they're like maybe I should get off this topic, but just all my kids just want to be on social media in any form.
Right.
And if we could have there be an alternative to like YouTube life hacks that are maybe, bookish, something cool. Like, I don't know, why not
talk about this offline because this is
okay. Right? I'm like totally excited about it. All right, great. I needed a new idea today.
Yes.
Anyway, and then our kids could help and they could feel like all this ownership.
Because I think what's in the way often of ideas like this is that people assume that reading is a drag for kids. And that's something that we're kind of trying to get at in the book and that I've been trying to get at as I talk to audiences. If you watch a kid with a Raina Telgemeier book or a Wimpy Kid book or, the new Katie Camillo novel, that's a happy kid. That's a kid who's enjoying what they're doing. Kids love their books, the good books. What they don't love is this atmosphere of pressure around reading and this atmosphere that the teachers and the parents have taken their reading and gotten in there and made it into something that's a performance for the adults to judge, and the more we can take it out of that realm, and I really think that as parents, we can do this, don't ask about your kids' reading level. Don't mention reading levels in your home. Reading levels are invented. There is no such thing as a reading level. This is a system that, someone came up with for some reason in the 1960s or 70s, and they went through and they took all these children's books and assigned letters to them. If you take 10 librarians, they wouldn't all agree what's an F and what's a K anyway, but it's an easy way to, keep the factory going of school and education. And, it's a way that kids can feel bad about themselves. If they're an F and their friend is a K, they feel bad. They feel left behind. And why? Everybody learns how to read. Everybody progresses through their reading. Yes, some kids struggle more with it, kids with dyslexia, kids with other, disorders that we're only really starting to understand that affect the speed of their reading, like auditory processing disorder. I mean, I don't know if you know any kids that have this, but I happen to know two separate kids who have been diagnosed with this. You'd never really know it, in talking to them. You might notice a slight delay when you talk to them and how they respond to you, but this is very, very crucial when it comes time to learn to read because of phonics, because you're learning to read by associating sounds with those marks on the page. So these kids have an extra step of struggle, and I mean, kids with dyslexia, it's like heroic to me how these kids, what they go through and how they eventually become readers by creating workarounds in their own brain. This is why so many dyslexic people go on to greatness because what they've had to do just to learn how to read is truly, it's heroic. So, all of this is stuff that makes kids subtly associate reading with this realm of life that is just not fun, but it doesn't have to be. So if you can create something else in your home where books are fun, books are just like, oh my God, did you see the new Dog Man? Can you believe he named the character that, or just stuff like that, you're really doing your kid a big favor.
Well, it's like, imagine if you went to a bookstore and saw all these great books and then somebody beside you was like, okay, yeah, but you can only read these 3. You'd be like, what? No, why would I want to do that? I want to read all those there. Why won't you let me pick? It's like the locus of control is gone, right?
Yes, exactly. And this is what people do to kids all the time. I'm a huge fan of librarians because the librarians actually are on the cutting edge of this stuff. They know the research and they watch kids. And there are many librarians in this country who are, rebelling and refusing to shelve their books by reading level. It's happening. So a lot of this that we've inherited is just, it's almost like it just won't leave our consciousness that got in there in like the 60s and the 70s, and we're all still responding to outdated ideas, notions. Like another good one is like, the idea that comic books and graphic novels are not real books. That doesn't, if your kid is really into reading only graphic novels, well, that's not really reading. That doesn't count. That's ridiculous, especially in this culture we're in. Such a visual culture, right? When images and words work together, it's even more powerful. And this, again, like, this is what was so great about doing this book, was we got to really look at the research. The research shows that, they did MRIs on the brains of kids who are reading. A kid who's reading a text with only words, one side of the brain is really lit up and working, and that's great. A kid who's reading a book with images and words together, both sides of the brain are lighting up and interacting with each other. Like, that's even better for brain development. This is why, of course, we have picture books at the early stages of a kid's life, but that doesn't end. Why would that end when they can read the words on their own? And again, I think we've inherited this partly because it's really expensive to print pictures. So in previous decades before, the current technological revolution, it was just, they printed the books without pictures because it was too expensive to put the pictures in. But we got in the idea like, oh, now you're done with pictures, you're on to words. And that's really changing. Librarians know it. Some of the teachers, the more, up to date teachers know this, but you still have parents who they come to us worried, like, my son will only read graphic novels. What should I do? I'm like, great, give him good ones. He's reading.
Well, it's like you were talking about, you like reading gardening books. If somebody was like, you can only read gardening books with no pictures, that would not be fun. You need the context. I mean, I think it's good to mix it up, right? They can read all types of books. Who did I interview? Like Gene Yang, who wrote Dragon Hoops. And he was amazing. He's an educator too, and he was awesome. And I had my son here with me while I interviewed him, and he was telling my son, he's like, oh, it's great to read graphic novels, but you don't have to only read, you can still mix it up, and that's great too. So you shouldn't feel bad about it, but variety is always great. So I don't know.
No, it's true. But there are parents who really kind of lean on the kids about the graphic novels, or create this idea that, okay, that's fine that you're reading that. Now read a real book.
Yeah. I think if they're reading,
Yeah.
thank goodness. You had this one quote in the book. You say, it's stressful to be a parent. It's stressful to be a person. But I've found that even in the most difficult moments, on the most challenging days, I can usually reach for a book and feel lifted up, returned to myself. On days when I felt as though I have nothing left to give to my kids, I've been able to sit next to them and open a book. We start reading and the world looks different. I loved that. That was like,
thank you.
that's just so great. I mean,
right? That it's, reading helps us to connect to our inner life and to what's most important, and I just think that that's why when your kids grow up and leave, sadly, as they do, and they will, the memories of reading with your kid can be some of the richest and most powerful memories you have, because it's those moments when you just feel so connected, and so in such a nice, real way, and so that's another one of the gifts that I think, you can give yourself and your kid when times are hard, is to sit with a book and to let yourself be reminded of the experience, the timeless experience of reading that you're going to carry with you from your childhood to your old age. You will always have that. It's yours, and if you give it to your kids, then you're giving them that option too, and it's really true, just as a parenting technique. There are so many days where you just feel like a failure as a parent, and I just haven't done anything right. They hate my personality, like everything is. And then you pick up a book, and suddenly you're the person reading this incredible piece of magic, and everything, you just feel better.
It's true. Although I have to say, I went through this period of time, or I shouldn't say I went through, it happens occasionally where I'm in one of these like sad moods where I'm so sleep deprived or overwhelmed or whatever. And I am fighting back tears as I'm reading to my kids. So I've developed this strategy in case this helps anybody else, where I count the letters in each word as I'm reading them. So if it's like, the tree is big, in my head, I would be like 3, 4, 2, 3. And then it would allow me to get out of my own mind enough that I could just like keep reading to the kids and stop crying. Is that
Oh,
pathetic?
that's so interesting. Yeah, because, well, there is also, I mean, the great thing about so many children's books is that, the great ones are written for adults too, especially picture books are meant to be read by an adult to a child. So if you're going to be a successful picture book creator, your books have to speak to the adult too, or they simply won't pick it up to read to the child, right? So that's often the case, that the adult is having an emotional experience that maybe the kid isn't at that moment. I've had that too. I'm always surprised by what makes my kids cry versus what makes me cry. And yeah, I find it a little embarrassing sometimes if, when I'm crying and reading a book to my kid and my kid is like, what? That's
Yeah.
but I haven't even tried any technique to stop it.
If you're in a desperate
I like that.
moment, like I have been, try that. So Maria, how did you get to be where you are in life? Like, can you back me up to the beginning of this
Yeah.
trajectory? Even just like a quicker synopsis of how did you end up as the children's books editor at the New York Times?
I
And
mean, and postscript, I just left that job last week and started a new job.
I saw that.
Yeah, I'm actually editing picture books now. I was at the New York Times for 5.5 wonderful years, and I love that. But this is another dream I had, which is to actually work on the books. So yeah,
And it's a new imprint. What's it called again? Astria?
it's called, well, the overall publishing house is called Astra Publishing House, and the imprint, picture book imprint that I work for is called Mine Edition, and it's actually an established brand and imprint in Europe. Started in Austria, Switzerland, France, lots of other countries, and the books are published in the U.S. and they're beautiful. Very art forward, as we say, very much about beautiful illustration and high quality book production. And so my job now is to expand this brand into the US and create more books by American authors and illustrators and create more awareness for the Mine Edition books in the US, because they're really beautiful and great picture books. So yeah, so that is a fun thing. But so, I'm someone who has gone through several stages in my career. I've switched what I do a lot, even though it's always been in the same basic area of books. So I started out right after college. I went to graduate school and I did a PhD in American literature at Columbia, and I thought I would be a professor. And toward the end of that, as I was finishing my dissertation, I just started to get this rumbling of a feeling like I I love writing and I want to write for a bigger audience, than when you're a professor. So, I love the teaching, but there is this other part of it which actually determines the course of your career, which is publishing for other academic readers. And, that just seemed like a bit of kind of a drag. And I wasn't sure I was up for it. So that was when I kind of made the transition into journalism. And that was great. Career changing is hard. It's not something that everyone wants to do, and it's hard. I was in my late 20s and early 30s and just starting out. So, I always say I got lucky, but I guess I also was really tenacious. Like I just I get a vision of where I want to go and I just do anything to get there. So I, grew up I grew up in Queens in a book loving house. My dad was an English teacher. My mom was a nurse. So, not fancy people, but our house was filled with books. And that was what, my parents were readers. And that was, again, this is what we were saying. This was such a gift to me. So, one thing that you can really keep in mind if you're, as you're raising your kid and if you're worried about if your kid is going to be a reader or do well, or even just will my kid do well in school? I mean, first of all, the studies show that kids who are independent readers do well in school. So if you're hovering over your child, he's not becoming an independent reader, that meaning a child who actually chooses on his own to read. If you choose on your own to read, you're more likely to be someone who does well in school. Anyway, so my childhood just basically showed me that You know, when books feel like home, that's a good thing because you get to school and school feels like home, and that's I think like kind of a key concept for me is that I have never felt kind of intellectually insecure. You know what I mean? Even though, I whatever, I don't come from any kind of fancy background at all. But books are home to me, and so that just really helped me at every stage of my career. So, I also just I really loved criticism of books too. So I love reading books and I love talking about books. I love the kind of writing that, kind of gets into like what is so great about this book or what is so bad about this book or why does, what is appeals to this kind of person about this book? Like I just really loved that. So that led me to criticism and I started writing reviews and eventually, so much of how you get where you want to go is just being really brave and like, you meet someone who works in a place you want to work and you actually say, and this was really hard for me, like, I would like to write a review for you. How do I do that? So I just kind of had a series of encounters with people like that, where I had to be really, really brave because I'm inherently actually a shy person when I first meet people. And so I could say that I was lucky, but also I just did it, so that's why I ended up, and also I like the small canvas of the review. So I had a bunch, for years, I've had many, many reviews in the New York Times. And, when I was not working there at Washington Post, I worked at the LA Times. You read one of my 800 or 1200 word reviews, I promise you that took me like a solid 2 weeks of working almost, a lot. I go over and over and over until every little bit of it is like how I want it to be. So that's also, I think, some of my, I look back at my life and I regret maybe that I haven't written the long books I wish I had written because I've been so obsessing over like 1200 word pieces, but that's kind of how it worked for me. And yeah, and then the more, just being around these children's books all day and in this atmosphere of journalism where everything's got to be quick. Everything, the conversations don't tend to last more than, 15 minutes. That would be like, people will actually say, I have to get back to work. Like, but isn't talking about books our work? So I just wanted to be in an atmosphere where you could talk about books and create things that lasted, for a longer time. So anyway, that's the new journey I'm on now, which is to see how I like working in that atmosphere of actually making the books, which is just a whole other, and it's just like, it's so incredible how hard people work, how much they care, how, I'm in awe of illustrators, so because I'm such a word person, I've spent my life obsessing over 800 words, as I said. I just cannot believe what they do, how well they do it, how natural. Like I get such joy from beautiful art and illustration. So now just working with illustrators has been, the nice thing about this stage for me. But again, it's all part of the same part of my life where I'm just really about children's books and helping people find the good ones, because like I said, like your job is not to teach your child to read or to keep track of your child's reading level. Your job is to create an atmosphere around book that's fun and joyful and spontaneous and lighthearted, even, like, as we said, like a gardening book is a book, for kids, the equivalent would be the Guinness Book of World Records. That's a book, for my younger son, the NBA statistic book, the year 2019 in the NBA is on his, that's a book, so creating an open-hearted atmosphere around, printed matter with images and words in your kid's life. That's good. So that's really been my passion now, is just keeping the spirit of joy and acceptance around children's books alive, like whether I'm at the New York Times or now at Mine Edition and Astor House, trying to get some really good books out there into the world for kids.
Just one last question. Do you have any advice to aspiring authors?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Authors of children's books.
Whatever.
Okay.
It can be. It doesn't have to be.
I just think that the stuff that comes from your deepest places, like your heart, is going to be your best stuff. And it's going to be always a process of going deeper and deeper inside yourself and connecting. Why do I want to write this? And staying true to that, and don't listen to the naysayers when you're writing from a real place. just keep at it. And you're going to get a lot of no's. A lot of people don't understand why you would want to write about that. That's not acceptable. That's weird, or that's boring. Stick with what you feel from your deepest place is your passion.
Love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books.
Bye.
Thanks again for listening to my podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. If you liked this episode, please follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books, and sign up for my mailing list at zibbyowens.com so you can always hear about the latest things I'm up to. Thanks a lot. Thanks to Blue Land Cleaning, our sponsor for today's episode. Blue Land Cleaning, get your single-use plastic packaging, make that a thing of the past with this eco-friendly cleaning products company. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing, and thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music. Thanks for listening. You could always email me at zibby@zibbyowens.com.